Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Focus for Monday, April the 3rd, 2023 at 12:41 p.m. Central Time. Today's focus, maturity is... ? Maturity is what? What is maturity? When we talk about maturity, what is it? And I really want you to think about this. Now, I kind of mentioned it yesterday in a sermon. It's one of those things that I thought, this is very important. This is a very practical point. I'm going to throw this out there and everyone's going to be talking about it afterwards. Everyone's going to be like, that point you made about maturity, that was really, really good. No one said anything about it, but I'm not giving up because I think that we need to talk about maturity. More importantly, I think we need to define maturity. Now, obviously, you're very aware of this. There are two aspects of maturity for us as Christians, right? There is just your normal, we'll call it the maturity of life, right? The maturity of you just being a person. Your personal maturity. Let's state it that way. There's your personal maturity, your maturity, your emotional maturity, your mental maturity, all of that different aspects of maturity. I know I said there's two and I just kind of broke it down into multiple ones, but we'll just call it your personal maturity. We'll just say number one is your personal maturity. Number two is your spiritual maturity, right? In other words, someone can be very mature personally, right, which would include their mental, emotional maturity, right? It would include all of that. A lot of people can be very mature personally, but when it comes to their spirituality, they're very spiritually immature, very spiritually immature. I think it's possible for someone maybe to have lots of spiritual maturity, but still lacking in these other areas of maturity. I don't know. That's almost an interesting discussion, right? I think I think it is very true that someone can be very mature personally, but lack spiritual maturity. I think we can agree there. But can you have spiritual maturity but lack personal maturity? I think you can have personal maturity and lack spiritual maturity. I just don't know. Can you have spiritual maturity and lack personal maturity? That wasn't even the original question, but now that's got me thinking about how that would work. You can give me your thoughts, all right? But when it comes to these two concepts of personal maturity and spiritual maturity, I think we have to realize they're very, 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 very different, and how you define them. When we talk of your personal maturity, right? When you look at a child and you're like, you need to become more mature. You need to grow up, right? A lot of times we'll say that. Sometimes you may say it to your spouse. You need to grow up. You need some maturity. Whoever you say it to, we typically understand that some of the aspects of that personal maturity is growing more and more independent, right? More and more to stand on your own. You accept responsibility. You can be on your own. You're independent. You're an independent person as very much an aspect of maturity. When you're looking at a teenager and you're like, hey, you need to grow up. You need some maturity. You're like, hey, it's time for you to start taking personal responsibility. You don't need someone to baby you. You don't need someone to supervise you. You don't need someone to remind you that it's time for school, that you need to do your homework, that you need take some responsibility, become more independent. And our personal life, maturity, is very much connected with independence, being independent, being able to stand on your own. I think we can all agree with that when it comes to maturity in your personal life, really the goal is a stronger and stronger independence. You can stand on your own. You don't need anyone else. You take responsibility. You can take care of yourself. You can take care of problems. You can stand on your own. All right. I think we will all, I'm not saying that captures every aspect of personal maturity, but it captures a large portion of it, right? That you become more independent. But when it comes to spiritual maturity, it is completely the opposite. See, in personal maturity, the goal is independence. In spiritual maturity, the goal is to become more and more dependent upon God. Spiritual maturity is that never-ending process, at least in this life, that ongoing process. Let's say this. Spiritual maturity is that ongoing process where we become more and more aware of our need for God. We become more and more dependent upon God. We become more and more aware of our own weaknesses, our own flaws, our own struggles, our own sins. See, the spiritually mature person sees their sin, their failure before they see anybody else's. The spiritually mature person is immediately, when they hear of other people's sins, they don't look down upon them or judge them. They immediately look to themselves, because the more mature you become spiritually, the more aware you become of your own weakness, your own flaws, your own sins, and your utter dependence upon God. The Bible obviously speaks of spiritual maturity. I mean, I've got 1 Peter chapter 2 right here. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and all slander. Like newborn infants, desire the pure milk of the word, so that you may grow up into your salvation. I like the way that translation says. You grow up into your salvation. As a Christian, we are to grow up into our salvation. And that growing up means we become more and more aware of our own flaws, our own weaknesses, our own failures, our own sin. And we just become more and more dependent upon God. Just that dependence grows every single day. And personal maturity, it's independence. I don't need it. I can do this. In spiritual maturity, it's like, woe is me. I'm undone. I'm a man of unclean hands, unclean lips, unclean works. I'm a sinner. I don't deserve anything. Lord, I need you. I am dependent upon you. I don't look to anywhere else for help. I only look to you. Where else can I go? It's you, Lord. I need you. I need every single day we wake up and Lord, I need you. I need you for everything. I need your grace. I need your mercy. I need your forgiveness. Because I am utterly incapable in myself. See, I think there's a period in spiritual growth. I think there's a period in spiritual growth where we enter into a phase where we feel very. It's almost a phase of it's an illusion, but it's a phase of self-deceit where we feel more, almost a sense of independence. Like, I can do this. Like, I'm reading my Bible. I go to church. I'm stopping. Like, we almost feel like I can do it. And then at some point, I think whatever that phase you want to call it, it's an illusion. It's fraudulent. It's where you feel like you can do it. You have this power. You've got it all figured out because you're growing spiritually. You're learning scripture, and you get this sense of almost power. This almost sense of like this sense of invincibility. Like, you can do it. And then sometimes it requires all of that to collapse. It all to blow up. The illusion is shattered. The mask is ripped off. And then you see yourself as a broken sinner, which you should have never stopped seeing yourself as. And that's when true maturity begins spiritually. I think the true path to spiritual maturity begins in the ashes and rubble of a life where their independence there is shattered. Their illusion of independence is shattered. Once that independence, that sense of independence, that sense of ability and strength, once that is shattered and it burns up and it blows up, then it's from that rubble, it's from those ashes that arises a deep, 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 deep awareness of one's dependence upon God. And that's the path to spiritual maturity. The path to spiritual maturity is seeing every single day just how weak we are. In our thinking, and our feeling, and our desires, and everything. And we just see what we are. We see that spiritual maturity is a constant awareness of what we are in and of ourselves. We're weak. We have all. Look, even if we don't commit an act physically, just think of all the acts we commit mentally. Just think, even though we don't go pursue the desire, think of all the desires that we have that are not right with God. They are contrary to God. So today, I want you to think about practical, personal maturity. I want you to think about your practical, personal maturity and how that seems to lead to a path of independence. And then I want you to contrast that with spiritual maturity, which should lead to a path of dependence. Then here's what I want you to do. I want you to find 5 scriptures that seem to show the dangers of an independent mindset, where someone's like, no, I'm going to do this on my own. Right? It's all, I mean, I think we can all see a little bit of that in Eve in Genesis 3, right? Hey, God's given me all of this. God, you know what? But I'm going to act independently of God. I'm going to take of this tree because God's holding back on me. I'm going to be like, I'm not going to be dependent upon God. I'm going to become like God. I think that there is a sense where she could either remain dependent upon God, just like, I'm dependent upon you, Lord, what you want me to know. I'm going to be happy with what you want me to know, what I can have, what I can't have. I'm going to be dependent upon you versus, no, God, I want to be like you. I'm going to know what you know, and I don't need you. I'm going to be independent of you. I'm going to be independent of your rules, independent of your restrictions. I think there's an example of someone pursuing independence over dependence. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Right? I mean, don't you think? So I want you to find 5 passages that really seem to show the dangers of this independent mindset, that our natural, our practical, our personal maturity leads us to have an independent way of thinking. Right? Then I want you to find 5 scriptures that seem to strongly promote dependence upon God, that demonstrates dependence upon God, that shows 5 that shows the dangers, the destruction that comes from an independence from God, right? In fact, you see a little bit of this, and now I'm just thinking in real time. If you go to Psalm 2, I think you know where we're going here. Psalm 2, why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and his anointed one. It's almost like, here's the world, here's the nation. It's like, no, we're not going to be dependent upon the anointed one. We're not going to be dependent upon him. All right, let's tear off their chains, throw their ropes off of. We want independence. We want our independence. We want our independence from God, his morality, we want our independence. So again, I want you to find 5 passages that shows this pursuit of independence, the dangers of independence, the destruction of independence. And then I want you to find 5 scriptures that really, 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 really show dependence upon God. because I think dependence upon God is what spiritual maturity absolutely is connected to that. Spiritual maturity is a growth in your dependence upon God. Growing in independence of God is the opposite of spiritual maturity. It's spiritual immaturity. That's what I really want you to work on today. 5 verses, 5 passages. Right? Obviously, each passage can have more than one verse. 5 passages that shows the dangers, the destruction of independence. Right? And then 5 passages, 5 verses that show dependence upon God. And I want you to send them to me. newsif@yahoo.com. 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 As you send them to me, then I may be turning on the microphone throughout the day. We just may do some extra today's focus podcast episodes. We just may put them all right here. Who knows? This may turn into a series, but I want us to really think about this contrast. Your personal maturity leads to independence. Spiritual maturity leads to a greater awareness of one's dependence upon God. Now, I want to do more, but I want to just present that idea today. I just want to present it. I want it to spark conversation. I want it to spark discussion. I want it to spark biblical exploration. I want you digging into the scriptures to look these scriptures up. I want you to see what you can find. And then we may take each one separately and look at that and just see what happens. All right. I want to put it in your hands. I mean, today's focus is about giving you something to focus on. So please engage and participate, or this episode is going to be a horrible failure. But I would love to get your thoughts. All right. Email me newsif. That's newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. You can take a screenshot of your notebook. You can just type them out and go, here's my 5 passages on independence. Here's my 5 passages on dependence. I've given you some examples. Psalm 2, clearly you see the nations are like, no, break off the chains. We don't need God. We're going to be independent. Eve, in a sense, is like, no, God, no. I'm going to be like you. I'm not going to be dependent upon you. I'm going to be your equal. What about Cain and Abel? What do you think? Do you think there's a little bit of that there? Was Abel demonstrating his dependence upon God? Was Cain showing his independence from God? Tower of Babel, were they trying to show their dependence or their independence of God? I mean, we can just go on and on and on throughout the Bible. Where are those good examples? All right. I'll look forward I'm going to look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. All right. And if you disagree with this, if you think, no, I don't think independence really fits personal maturity, and I don't think dependence fits spiritual maturity, then let me know. Let me know where you disagree with me on this particular subject. This all was sparked from a podcast on spiritual formation. I got to find it. When I find it, we may play a little bit of it. And this is what sparked this discussion. I don't even remember when I heard it. I don't even remember. It was obviously 3, 4 in the morning recently. I got to track it down. Once I can track it down, then maybe we'll play a little of it. And I think it will lead to a good discussion. I think it will. All right, there you go. newsif@yahoo.com. I can't wait to hear from you. All right, thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. We'll be back on the air hopefully shortly. God bless.